The auction block smelled of sweat and desperation when Wade Irving first laid eyes on the girl they called Broken, standing there with her head down and a small wooden cage clutched to her chest like it held the last piece of her soul. Ruby City, Montana Territory, had seen its share of ugliness in the summer of 1877, but this particular gathering in the town square drew a crowd that made Wade's stomach turn. He had ridden in just an hour before, his horse exhausted from 3 days of hard travel from the cattle ranch he managed up near the Bitterroot Mountains. All he wanted was a hot meal and a bed that did not rock beneath him, but the commotion near the general store caught his attention. "Lot number 7, the auctioneer called out, a thin man with spectacles that caught the afternoon sun. "Indenture papers for Miss Josie Elliott. 5 years of service to settle her late father's debts. Strong back, can cook and clean. Starting bid at $20. Wade pushed through the crowd, his 6'4" frame making it easy enough. When he got close enough to see her properly, his breath caught. She could not have been more than 21 or 22, with auburn hair that fell in tangled waves past her shoulders. Her dress was patched and faded, the color of old wheat, but it was her hands that held his attention, wrapped protectively around that small cage. Inside, a sparrow fluttered nervously, its brown feathers catching bits of light. "25, called out a voice Wade recognized. Samuel Pritchard, owner of the Silver Bell Saloon. A man known for working his girls hard and paying them little. Wade's jaw tightened. He had not planned on this. He had not planned on anything except restocking supplies and heading back to his ranch. But something about the way she held herself, like she was both there and not there at the same time, like she had already left her body to escape whatever came next, made his decision for him. $50, Wade said, his voice carrying clear across the square. The crowd went quiet. $50 was more than most men in Ruby City made in 2 months. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly met his hairline. Josie's head lifted for the first time. Her eyes met his, and Wade saw they were the color of creek water in spring, that particular shade of green-brown that changed depending on the light. She looked at him like she was trying to figure out if he was salvation or just another kind of damnation. $50 American, the auctioneer repeated, as if he needed to verify what he heard. Going once, going twice, sold to the gentleman in the black hat. The whole transaction took less than 10 minutes. Wade signed papers he barely read, handed over money that would set his ranch plans back by half a year, and suddenly found himself responsible for a young woman who would not look at him, and a bird in a cage that would not stop singing. "I am Wade Irving," he said when they stood outside the general store away from the dispersing crowd. "I run a cattle ranch about 30 miles north of here. The work is hard but honest. I will not hurt you." Josie said nothing. She just held that cage tighter. "What is your bird's name?" Wade tried again. "Hope," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her name is Hope." It was the only word she spoke to him for the next 3 days. The journey back to Wade's ranch took them through some of the most beautiful country Montana had to offer. Rolling grasslands that stretched out like a green ocean, mountains in the distance that still held snow on their peaks even in July. Wade's horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Chief, plodded along at an easy pace. Wade had bought Josie a gentle mare from the livery, a dappled gray called Dove that seemed to sense her rider's nervousness and moved with extra care. Josie kept the bird cage tied carefully to her saddle, one hand always near it to steady it over rough ground. Wade watched her from the corner of his eye, trying to piece together the story of how she ended up on an auction block in a frontier town. He knew better than to press. She would talk when she was ready if she ever was. They camped the first night beside a creek that cut through a stand of cottonwood trees. Wade set up camp with practiced efficiency, building a fire and setting coffee to boil. He had brought provisions from town, including some eggs carefully wrapped in his saddlebags. "You should eat something," he said, offering her some of the beans and bacon he had prepared. Josie took the plate with a small nod. She ate mechanically, like it was just a task to complete. But Wade noticed she saved a few crumbs of the cornbread for her Sparrow, opening the cage door just wide enough to slip them inside. "How long have you had hope?" Wade asked, settling onto his bedroll across the fire from her. For a long moment, he thought she would not answer. Then she said, 3 years. My father found her with a broken wing. We nursed her back, but she never could fly quite right after. Too many breaks that healed crooked." She paused, stroking one finger gently along the bars of the cage. "That is when they started calling me broken too. Said I was just like that bird, damaged goods." Wade's hands tightened around his tin cup. "Who said that?" "Everyone." Josie's voice was flat, matter of fact. "After my mother died, my father took to drinking. He ran up debts all over town. When he passed last month, the creditors came calling. I had nothing to give them except myself." "That is behind you now," Wade said, and he was surprised by the fierceness in his own voice. "You are not broken, and you are not goods to be bought and sold. Those papers I signed, they give you a place to work and a roof over your head for 5 years. But I will tell you right now, if you want to leave after we get to the ranch, I will give you money for passage anywhere you want to go. You have my word on that." Josie looked up at him then, really looked at him, studying his face in the firelight. Wade did not know what she saw there, but something in her expression softened just a fraction. "Why did you buy my papers?" she asked. "You do not know me." Wade had been asking himself the same question. "I saw Samuel Pritchard bidding. I know what kind of life he would have given you. I could not let that happen. Most men would not have cared. I am not most men." The sparrow sang then, a small bright trill that seemed too large for its tiny body. Hope hopped from perch to perch inside the cage, her movements quick and lively despite her crooked wing. "She likes you," Josie said, and there might have been the smallest hint of a smile on her lips. "She does not usually sing around strangers." "Maybe she knows I mean no harm," Wade said. That night, lying in his bedroll under a sky absolutely littered with stars, Wade wondered what in the hell he had gotten himself into. He ran a small operation, just him and 2 hired hands, Miguel and his son Carlos. They raised cattle and broke horses, lived simple and worked hard. He had never had a woman on the ranch before, had never wanted the complication. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Josie's face on that auction block, and he knew he would have made the same choice 100 times over. They reached the ranch on the 3rd day, arriving in the late afternoon when the sun painted everything gold. Wade's place was modest but well kept, a sturdy log cabin with a porch that overlooked a valley where his cattle grazed. There was a barn, a chicken coop, a small bunkhouse where Miguel and Carlos stayed. The mountains rose up behind it all like sentinels, purple and blue in the distance. "It is not much," Wade said as they dismounted, "but it is home." Josie looked around, taking it all in. For the first time since he met her, her expression held something other than resignation. "It is beautiful," she said softly. Miguel came out of the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. He was a man in his 50s, weathered by years of outdoor work but still strong as an ox. His eyes went wide when he saw Josie. "Boss, you did not mention you were bringing back company." "Miguel, this is Josie Elliott. She will be staying with us, helping with the cooking and such." "Josie, this is Miguel Ramirez. His son Carlos is around here somewhere." Miguel recovered quickly, tipping his hat to Josie with courtly grace. "Señorita, welcome. Any help in the kitchen is most welcome. The boss is cooking, it is functional but not exciting." That earned the first real smile Wade had seen from Josie. "I can do better than functional." Carlos appeared a moment later, a young man of 19 with his father's dark eyes and easy smile. He took one look at Josie and seemed to forget how to speak for a moment, which Miguel remedied with a swat to the back of his head. "Mind your manners, boy. Help the boss get their horses settled." Wade showed Josie to the cabin while Miguel and Carlos handled the animals. The inside was neat but sparse, clearly the domain of a man who lived alone. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a cast iron stove, and two smaller rooms off to the sides. "You can have that room there," Wade said, gesturing to the larger of the two bedrooms. "It has a window that looks out on the valley. I will take the smaller one." "I cannot take your room," Josie protested. "You can and you will. It is already decided." She looked like she wanted to argue but seemed too tired. "Thank you," she said instead. "There is a pump outside for washing up. Supper is usually around 6. Tomorrow I will show you around properly, introduce you to the chickens and the milk cow. For tonight, just rest." Josie nodded and carried her small bag into the bedroom. Wade heard her moving around inside, heard the soft creak of the bed frame as she sat down. He gave her privacy and went back outside to help with the horses, but his mind stayed in that cabin, wondering if she felt safe or scared or something in between. That evening they all ate together at the rough wooden table in the cabin. Wade had thrown together some stew from dried beef and vegetables from his small garden. It was edible but nothing special. Josie ate quietly, the bird cage sitting on the floor beside her chair. Hope sang intermittently, small bursts of melody that filled the silence. "That is a fine little bird," Miguel said, leaning down to peer at Hope. "My grandmother used to say that sparrows were blessed by God because they were the only birds brave enough to sing for Jesus on the cross." "I did not know that," Josie said, looking at Hope with new eyes. "Oh yes. All the other birds were too sad to sing, but the sparrow sang to comfort him. That is why their song is so sweet, even though they are small and plain." Carlos, who had been stealing glances at Josie all through dinner, finally found his voice. "You let her out, the bird." "Sometimes when we were home. She cannot fly far with her wing, but she likes to hop around and explore." "You could let her out here," Wade found himself saying. "Place is secure enough. Plenty of places for a small bird to perch." Josie looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "Maybe. I will think about it." After dinner, Miguel and Carlos headed back to the bunkhouse, leaving Wade and Josie alone. The silence between them was not quite comfortable but not hostile either. Wade cleaned the dishes while Josie sat by the fire, holding Hope's cage in her lap. "Tell me about the ranch," she said finally. "What is the work like here?" Wade dried his hands and settled into the chair across from her. "We run about 100 head of cattle right now, hoping to expand that over the next few years. Spring and fall are the busiest times with calving and roundup. Summer is for haying and mending fences. Winter is for surviving." He smiled a little. "Miguel and Carlos handle most of the cattle work. I break and train horses on the side, sell them to folks who need good mounts. It is a living, not a fortune." "It sounds honest." "It is that." "What would you have me do?" Wade leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Whatever you are comfortable with. Cooking if you want. The chickens need tending, eggs collected. The garden could use a woman's touch, I will not lie about that. Mending clothes, washing up. But Josie, I want you to understand something. You are not a slave here. You are not even really a servant, despite what those papers say. You are a person who needed help and I was able to give it." That is all." Tears welled up in Josie's eyes, the first real emotion other than fear he had seen from her. She blinked them back quickly, but not before one escaped down her cheek. "I do not know how to repay kindness. I am not used to it anymore. You do not have to repay anything. Just help out where you can and get some rest. You look like you have not slept properly in weeks." "I have not," she admitted. "I keep thinking someone is going to come take everything away." "Not while I am here. You have my word on that too." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you." It was a start. The days settled into a rhythm. Josie woke before dawn, same as Wade, and they would share coffee on the porch while the world went from black to gray to gold. She took to the chickens immediately, talking to them like they were old friends as she scattered feed and collected eggs. The milk cow, a placid Jersey named Buttercup, responded to her gentle hands at milking time better than she ever had to Wade's rougher approach. The cooking improved dramatically. Josie might have been called broken by the cruel tongues in Ruby City, but there was nothing broken about the way she moved in a kitchen. She made bread that was light and fluffy, stews that actually had flavor, biscuits that Miguel declared were better than his own mother's, though he swore Josie to secrecy about that admission. Hope the Sparrow became a fixture around the cabin. True to Wade's suggestion, Josie began letting her out during the daytime. The bird could not fly more than a few feet before her crooked wing failed her, but she hopped around on the furniture, perched on the windowsills, and sang her heart out from morning until night. She seemed particularly fond of Carlos, landing on his shoulder whenever he came inside and pecking gently at his ear until he laughed. "She is flirting with you," Miguel teased his son. "At least someone is," Carlos shot back, though his eyes went to Josie when he said it. Wade noticed, of course. He noticed everything about Josie now. The way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating on a difficult task. The way she hummed while she worked, unconsciously mimicking Hope's melodies. The way the sun caught gold highlights in her auburn hair when she hung laundry on the line. The way she smiled, really smiled, when one of the barn cats brought her a mouse as an offering. He noticed, and he tried very hard not to let it mean anything. But it did mean something. It meant he found excuses to be near the cabin when he should have been out checking fence lines. It meant he washed up more carefully before dinner, even changed his shirt if it was particularly dirty from the day's work. It meant he lay awake at night in his small bedroom, acutely aware that she was just on the other side of that log wall, so close and yet impossibly far away. A month passed. Then, too, summer deepened into late August, the days still hot but the nights starting to cool. The cattle were fat on mountain grass. The horses Wade was training showed excellent progress. Miguel's knee, which always acted up in damp weather, was behaving itself. Everything was going well. Too well, Wade thought sometimes. He kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Thursday, just after noon. Wade was in the corral working with a young stallion, a beautiful paint horse with one blue eye and one brown. The horse was stubborn but smart, and Wade was close to a breakthrough with him. Josie was in the garden, her skirts tied up practically as she weeded between the rows of beans and squash. Hope sat on the fence post nearby, contributing her song to the afternoon. That was when the riders appeared. There were 4 of them, coming up the main trail that led to the ranch. They sat their horses like men who were used to having their way, and even from a distance Wade could see the glint of gun metal. His stomach dropped. "Miguel," he called out, keeping his voice calm and level, "we have company." Miguel appeared from the barn, took one look at the approaching riders, and his hand drifted toward his hip where his old army revolver rested. "I see them, boss. Get Carlos. Keep him close to the house." Already there. Indeed, Carlos was emerging from the chicken coop, his easy smile fading when he saw the tension in the adults around him. The riders pulled up just outside the corral. Their leader was a man Wade recognized from Ruby City, though he could not recall his name. He was in his 40s, well-dressed by frontier standards with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. "You would be Wade Irving," the man said. "It was not a question." "I would be. What can I do for you gentlemen? My name is Bernard Talbot. I hold several notes of debt from the late Marcus Elliott. When his property was sold at auction, I was out of town. I was not happy to discover that the daughter had been included in that sale, as I had specific plans for her." Wade's blood went cold, but he kept his expression neutral. "The sale was legal and recorded. I have the papers." "Oh, I am sure you do, but you see, there is a question about whether Marcus Elliott had the right to indenture his daughter for his debts. He was not of sound mind in his last days, drunk more often than sober. Some might argue those papers are not valid. Some might argue a lot of things, does not make them true." Talbot's smile widened, showing teeth like a predator. "I am prepared to buy her contract from you. I will give you $75, a profit of $25 over what you paid." "That is more than fair. She is not for sale." "Everything is for sale, Mr. Irving. Everyone has a price." Wade stepped out of the corral, positioning himself between Talbot and the house where Josie had stopped her weeding and was watching with wide eyes. "Not her. Not at any price." "You need to leave now." Talbot's expression hardened. "You are making a mistake. It would not be my first, but it is my mistake to make. This is my land and you are not welcome on it. Leave." For a tense moment, Wade thought it would come to gunfire. His own revolver was in the cabin, hung on a peg by the door, too far away. But Miguel had his, and even at his age, Miguel was steady and accurate. The odds were not good for anyone if bullets started flying. Talbot must have reached the same conclusion. He gathered his reins and turned his horse, but not before delivering a parting shot. "This is not finished, Irving. The girl is damaged goods anyway. You will tire of her soon enough, and when you do, I will be waiting." They rode off in a cloud of dust. Wade did not move until they crested the hill and disappeared from view. Only then did he let out the breath he had been holding. Josie appeared at his elbow, her face pale. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I should have told you there might be trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Wade asked, turning to face her. "Talbot. He wanted to buy my father's debts. He owns the lumber mill in Ruby City, has business interests all over the territory. He also owns several brothels. When my father died, Talbot told me I could work off the debts on my back if I was smart about it." Her voice shook, but she kept going. "That is why I went to the auction. I thought indenture to anyone would be better than what he had planned." Wade felt rage bubble up in his chest, hot and fierce. "He will not touch you, I promise you that. You do not know him. He gets what he wants one way or another. Not this time." Miguel came over, his weathered face grim. "Boss, that man, he is dangerous. He has money and influence. If he wants to make trouble for us, he can do it. Let him try." "Wade," Josie said, and it was the first time she had used his given name. The sound of it on her lips did something strange to his heart. "You have done enough. More than enough. I could leave, go somewhere he cannot find me." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "You are not running anymore. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be." "Why?" Tears were flowing freely down her face now. "Why do you care so much?" Wade reached out, then hesitated, his hand hovering in the air between them. Josie closed the distance, stepping forward and letting his hand cup her cheek. Her skin was warm, slightly damp from tears and honest work. "Because you matter," Wade said simply. "Because hope sings when you are around, and that damn bird has good instincts." Because you make the best biscuits I have ever tasted. Because when you laugh, which is not often enough, it sounds like music. Because you are not broken, no matter what anyone called you. You are strong and brave and kind, and I. He stopped, aware that he was saying too much, revealing too much. You what? Josie whispered. I care about you, Wade finished. More than I should, probably. More than is wise, given everything. But there it is. She searched his face, her green-brown eyes moving over his features like she was memorizing them. Then, slowly, she turned her head and pressed a kiss to his palm. It was the lightest touch, barely there, but it sent lightning through Wade's entire body. I care about you too, she said softly. I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it. Afraid of what? Afraid it was not real. Afraid it was just gratitude or dependence or something else that would fade. Afraid that you would wake up one day and realize Talbot was right, that I am just damaged goods. Her voice broke on the last words. Wade pulled her into his arms then, held her while she cried against his chest. Hope, who had watched the whole exchange from her fence post, let out a trill of song that seemed to encompass every emotion Wade was feeling. Joy and fear and hope and love all tangled together. You are not damaged, he murmured into her hair. You are perfect. That evening, after a tense dinner where everyone tried and failed to pretend nothing had happened, Wade and Josie sat on the porch steps. The stars were coming out, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Hope was tucked safely in her cage inside the cabin, already asleep with her head tucked under her wing. Tell me about your mother, Wade said. You mentioned she died. Was it recent? Josie shook her head. 5 years ago, fever took her fast and hard. My father never recovered from losing her. They were true partners, you know, the kind of love where they finished each other's sentences and could have whole conversations without saying a word. When she died, it was like half of him died too. He just sort of gave up on living. That is a beautiful kind of love. Rare, though. Do you think so? I used to believe everyone could find that if they looked hard enough. Used to, before life got hard. Before I learned that most people settle for much less. Convenience or security or just not being alone. Wade was quiet for a moment, watching the last light fade from the western sky. My parents had that kind of love, he said finally. My mother died in childbirth when I was 12. The baby died too, a little girl. My father kept going, raised me and my brother, but you could tell part of him was missing. He would stand at her grave sometimes and just talk to her, telling her about his day like she was still there to hear it. When I was 19, he caught pneumonia. I think part of him was ready to go, ready to be with her again. I am sorry, Josie said, her hand finding his in the darkness. Me too. But I am also grateful I got to see what real love looks like, not the pretty, easy version people write about in dime novels. The hard kind, the kind that endures through loss and pain and years of just waking up every day and choosing each other. Is that what you want? That kind of love? Wade squeezed her hand gently. I never thought I would find it. This ranch, the work, it keeps me busy enough that I have not minded being alone. But lately, he trailed off. Lately what? He turned to look at her, and in the starlight her face was luminous. Lately I wake up and the first thing I think about is whether you are awake too. Whether you are safe, whether you are happy. I find myself listening for your voice, for Hope's song. The cabin feels different with you in it. It feels like home in a way it never did when it was just me. Wade, she breathed. I know it is too soon. I know you have been through hell and probably need time to figure out what you want. But I need you to know that I am not Talbot, and I am not your father, and I am not any of the men who called you broken. I see you, Josie, the real you, and I am falling in love with that woman. She was crying again, but this time there was a smile through the tears. "It is not too soon," she said. "I think I have been falling in love with you since that day at the auction when you looked at me like I was a person instead of a problem. Every day since has just made it more real." Wade cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Can I kiss you, please?" He kissed her softly at first, a question and an answer all at once. She tasted like the honey she had stirred into her tea after dinner, sweet and warm. Her hands came up to grip his shirt, holding him close, and the kiss deepened. It was not desperate or rushed. It was the kiss of two people who knew they had time, who were in this for the long haul. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Josie laughed. It was pure and joyful, the sound Wade had been hoping to hear more of. "I never thought I could feel this way again. After everything, I thought that part of me was gone. It was just waiting for the right moment to wake up." They sat there until late, talking and kissing and planning a future that felt suddenly possible. They talked about expanding the ranch, about getting more chickens and maybe a pig or two, about building a proper smokehouse and a root cellar, about a future that included both of them together. The trouble with Bernard Talbot came to a head 2 weeks later. Wade had gone into Ruby City for supplies, taking Miguel with him and leaving Carlos to watch over the ranch and Josie. It should have been a simple trip, there and back in a day. But when they arrived in town, they found the sheriff waiting for them. Sheriff Thomas Grayson was a decent man, as lawmen went. He had fought with the Union in the war, come west looking for a fresh start, and generally tried to keep the peace without too much bloodshed. But he was also a practical man who understood where power lay in Ruby City. "Wade," he said, intercepting them before they could even tie up their horses. "We need to talk." Wade dismounted, his instincts already on high alert. "What about? Bernard Talbot has filed a complaint. Says you are harboring his property, that the papers you hold for Josie Elliott's indenture are fraudulent." "They are not fraudulent. I bought them fair and square at a legal auction." "I know that, and you know that, but Talbot has money for lawyers and he is making a lot of noise about it." "I am supposed to bring the girl in for questioning." "The hell you are," Wade said flatly. "Wade, do not make this harder than it has to be. I am trying to help you here. Help me by telling Talbot to shove his complaint where the sun does not shine." Grayson sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Look, I know Talbot, I know what he is, but he has the territorial judge in his pocket. If this goes to court, you might lose, and if you lose, Josie goes to him. Is that what you want?" "So what do you suggest?" "Marry her," Grayson said bluntly. "A man can have indenture papers on someone, but he cannot have them on his wife. Once you are married, Talbot has no claim. His complaint becomes meaningless." Wade stared at the sheriff. "Are you serious?" "As a heart attack. It is the only legal way to protect her that I can see. I brought the territorial chaplain into town. He can perform the ceremony today if you want. Make it official before Talbot can file anything else." Miguel, who had been silent up to now, spoke up. "The boss is right, Wade. It is the best way." Wade's mind was racing. Marriage. He had thought about it, of course, in the quiet moments when he let himself imagine a future with Josie, but this felt rushed, forced by circumstances rather than genuine choice. Josie should have a say in this. "Then ride home and ask her," Grayson said, "but do it fast. Talbot has men on the way to your ranch with papers authorizing them to take her into custody. I managed to delay them, but they will be leaving within the hour." Wade did not need to hear more. He swung back into his saddle, Chief already sensing his rider's urgency. "Miguel, get the supplies. Meet me back at the ranch." "Go, boss. We will handle it." Wade rode like a man possessed, pushing Chief harder than he probably should have, but unable to stop himself. The horse responded gamely, his powerful legs eating up the miles. What normally took an hour and a half took just over an hour, and both horse and rider were lathered with sweat when they thundered up to the cabin. Josie came running out, alarm on her face. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Wade dismounted in a rush, his words tumbling out. "Talbot filed a complaint. He is sending men to take you. The sheriff says the only way to protect you legally is if we get married. He has a chaplain in town ready to perform the ceremony." She went pale. "Married? I know it is not romantic. I know you deserve better than this, better than a rushed ceremony forced by legal necessity. But Josie, I meant what I said. I love you. I want a future with you. I was going to court you properly, take time, ask you when the moment was right, but we are out of time." Carlos had appeared from the barn, his young face troubled. "Miss Josie, whatever you need, we will help." Josie looked at the three of them, these men who had become her family over the past few months. Then her gaze settled on Wade, searching his face. "You want to marry me?" "More than anything, but only if you wanted to. If you do not, we will find another way. I will take you to California or Oregon or hell, Canada if we have to. Somewhere Talbot cannot reach you." "I do not want to run any more," she said quietly. Then, louder, "I want to marry you, Wade Irving. Not because I have to, but because I love you too." Relief flooded through Wade so intensely his knees nearly buckled. "Thank God. But I have one condition." "Anything?" "Hope comes to the ceremony. She is family too." Wade laughed, the sound bright and surprised. "Of course she does. Would not dream of it otherwise." They rode back to Ruby City together, Hope's cage carefully tied to Josie's saddle. She sang the entire way, her melody rising and falling with the rhythm of the horse's hooves. It seemed fitting somehow. The bird who had been there through Josie's darkest days would be there for one of her brightest. They met Miguel on the trail, wagon loaded with supplies. He took one look at their faces and grinned. "So we are having a wedding." "We are having a wedding," Wade confirmed. "Good. I will spread the word. A wedding should have witnesses." By the time they reached Ruby City, the sun was starting its descent toward the mountains. Word had indeed spread, and a small crowd had gathered outside the church. These were the good people of Ruby City, the ones who had watched Josie grow up, who had been saddened by her fall from grace through no fault of her own, and who were genuinely happy to see her getting a chance at happiness. The chaplain was a round man with kind eyes and a booming voice. His name was Father Benedict, though he insisted everyone just call him Ben. "I understand we are working under time constraints," he said, "but that does not mean we have to rush through the sacred. Come, let us make this a proper ceremony." The church was small and simple, with rough wooden pews and a cross carved by hand hanging behind the altar. Someone, perhaps Sheriff Grayson's wife, had brought wildflowers and arranged them in mason jars. The evening light streamed through the windows, painting everything gold. Josie looked down at her work dress and dusty boots. "I am not dressed for a wedding." "You are perfect," Wade said. Mrs. Grayson appeared as if summoned, carrying a dress over her arm. "I thought you might need this, dear. It was my wedding dress. We are about the same size." Tears sprang to Josie's eyes. "I could not." "You can and you will. Every bride deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day." Mrs. Grayson led Josie to a small room off the main chapel. "Come along. We do not have much time to make you gorgeous." While Josie was getting ready, Wade stood at the altar with Father Benedict and Miguel. Carlos had been dispatched to keep watch for Talbot's men. The crowd in the church was growing, people filing in to witness this hastily arranged ceremony. Wade recognized many faces, mostly good folks. But he also noticed some of Talbot's associates lurking in the back rows, no doubt ready to report back to their employer. "Nervous?" Father Benedict asked with a twinkle in his eye. "Terrified," Wade admitted. Not about marrying Josie, about everything that comes after. That is the way of it. Marriage is not the end of the story, son. It is the beginning. The real work starts now. I am ready for the work. I believe you are. Then the door to the side room opened and Josie emerged. Wade forgot how to breathe. Mrs. Grayson's dress fit her beautifully, the cream-colored fabric highlighting the auburn in her hair, which had been brushed and pinned up with wildflowers woven through it. She was not wearing shoes, having refused to wear her dusty boots and declaring that God would not mind her bare feet. She carried Hope's cage in one hand, and in the other, a small bouquet of more wildflowers. She walked down the aisle toward Wade, her eyes locked on his, and he knew with absolute certainty that this was right. This was what all the lonely years had been leading to, this moment, this woman. Father Benedict began the ceremony, his voice filling the small church. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Hope sang then, a clear, sweet song that made everyone in the church smile. Father Benedict paused, then continued, and with the blessing of this small sparrow, who reminds us that God sees even the smallest of his creatures. The vows were simple but profound. Wade promised to love and cherish Josie, to protect and provide for her, to be her partner in all things. Josie promised the same, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. When Father Benedict pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. Wade pulled Josie into his arms and kissed her, a kiss that was witnessed by half the town and blessed by the song of a small brown sparrow with a crooked wing. They had just broken apart, both smiling like fools, when the church doors burst open. Bernard Talbot stood in the entrance, his face twisted with rage. Behind him were 3 men, all armed. "This ceremony is illegal," he shouted. "That woman is indentured property, and she cannot enter into marriage without her debt holder's permission." Wade stepped in front of Josie, his body language making it clear he would go through Talbot to get to her. "The ceremony is legal and binding. She is my wife now. Your claim is void." "I have papers," Talbot snarled, waving a sheaf of documents. "Signed by Judge Morrison himself. She is to be remanded into my custody immediately." Sheriff Grayson stood up from his pew. "Your papers are too late, Bernard. The marriage is consummated in the eyes of God and the law. You have no claim. We will see about that. I will have this farce of a marriage annulled." "Good luck with that," Father Benedict said mildly. "I am ordained by the territorial bishop and commissioned by the federal government to perform marriages. My authority supersedes local judges. This marriage is legitimate, and any attempt to dissolve it will require going through channels that I promise you will take years." Talbot's face went from red to purple. For a moment, Wade thought the man might actually draw his gun. But even Talbot was not foolish enough to start shooting in a church full of witnesses, including the town's sheriff. "This is not over," he hissed. "You have made an enemy today, Irving. You will regret it." "I have made an enemy of a man who treats human beings like property," Wade said coldly. "If that is the price of doing what is right, I will pay it gladly." Talbot turned on his heel and stormed out, his men following. The tension in the church remained for a few heartbeats after he left, then broke like a wave. People crowded around Wade and Josie, offering congratulations and well wishes. Miguel appeared at Wade's elbow, his weathered face split in a huge grin. "Boss, we need to get going. Talbot will not give up this easily. Best to get you two home and secure." Wade nodded. He turned to Josie, who was being embraced by Mrs. Grayson and several other townswomen. "Josie, we should go." She extracted herself from the well-wishers and came to his side, Someone had given her a shawl against the cooling evening air, and she wrapped it around her shoulders. "I am ready." They rode home under a sky full of stars, a strange caravan consisting of Wade and Josie on horseback, Miguel driving the supply wagon, and Carlos riding scout ahead of them. Hope sang from her cage for the first few miles, then settled into sleep, rocked by the motion of the horse. "So we are married," Josie said at one point, her voice soft with wonder. "We are married," Wade confirmed. "How do you feel about that? Happy, scared, grateful, a little bit of everything, I think." "That sounds about right." She reached over and took his hand. They rode that way for a while, hands clasped between their horses, a connection maintained even in motion. When they reached the ranch, it was full dark. Miguel and Carlos helped unload the wagon, then tactfully announced they were going to take first watch in case Talbot tried anything foolish during the night. Wade knew they were also giving the newlyweds privacy, and he was grateful for it. Inside the cabin, Wade lit lamps and stirred the banked fire back to life. Josie set Hope's cage in its usual spot and draped a cloth over it so the bird could sleep. The cabin felt different somehow, charged with new significance. This was not just where they lived anymore. This was their home, their marriage bed, the place where they would build a life together. "I should tell you," Josie said, turning to face him. "I am scared." "Of what?" "Of not being enough. Of being the broken thing they said I was. Of disappointing you." Wade crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "You could never disappoint me. And you are not broken, Josie Irving. You hear me? You are strong and brave and beautiful, and I am the luckiest man alive to call you my wife." She looked up at him, her green-brown eyes searching his face. "I do not know how to be a wife, not really. My parents died before I learned all the things a woman should know. Then we will figure it out together. I do not know how to be a husband either. We will make mistakes. We will fight sometimes. But we will do it together, and that makes all the difference." "You really believe that?" "I really do." She kissed him then, standing on her toes to reach his lips. The kiss was different from the ones before. It held promise and permission, an invitation to a future they would build one day at a time. Wade swept her into his arms, carrying her to what had been his small bedroom but would now be theirs. She laughed against his chest, the sound like music, like Hope's song, like coming home. The days and weeks that followed their hasty wedding settled into a new rhythm. Josie moved her few belongings into Wade's room, and they gave up any pretense of separate sleeping arrangements. Miguel and Carlos continued to be the very picture of discretion, though Wade caught his ranch hands grinning at each other more than once when Josie would kiss Wade goodbye in the morning before he headed out to work. Talbot made a few more attempts to cause trouble. He filed complaints with the territorial government, hired lawyers to look for loopholes in the marriage. But Father Benedict had been right. The marriage was legal and binding, witnessed by half of Ruby City and recorded properly in the church and county registers. After a month of throwing money at the problem and getting nowhere, Talbot finally seemed to give up. But Wade remained vigilant. Men like Talbot did not forgive or forget. Life on the ranch continued. The cattle thrived. Wade finished training the paint stallion, selling him to a rancher from Butte for a good price. The money went into savings, into plans for expanding the ranch, for building a life that could support a family, because they were a family now. Wade and Josie, Miguel and Carlos, who had become like kin, the chickens and Buttercup the cow and Chief and Dove and all the other animals that made the ranch home. And Hope, whose song filled the cabin from dawn to dusk. Josie flourished. The haunted look faded from her eyes, replaced by a contentment that made her beautiful in new ways. She laughed freely now, played games with Carlos, who treated her like the older sister he never had. helped Miguel mend tack, and listened to his stories about his life in Mexico before he came north. And with Wade, she bloomed. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. They worked side by side in the garden, their hands meeting in the soil. They rode out to check on the cattle together, Josie proving herself a competent horsewoman. They made love with a passion that still surprised them both, learning each other's bodies with the dedication of scholars studying a beloved text. One evening in late October, as the first hints of winter touched the high peaks, Josie had an announcement at dinner. "I am pregnant," she said, simple and direct. The table went silent for a beat, then erupted. Miguel whooped and grabbed her in a careful hug. Carlos went red and stammered congratulations, and Wade just sat there, stunned into immobility. "Wade," Josie said, coming to kneel beside his chair. "Are you all right?" He realized there were tears on his face. "I am more than all right. I am perfect. We are having a baby. We are having a baby." He pulled her onto his lap, mindful of her condition even though she was probably only a few weeks along. "When?" "I think late May or early June." "I am not completely sure. We need to get a cradle and more blankets, and we should probably expand the cabin, add another room. Wade, we have time." "Not much time. Babies come fast," Miguel laughed. "Boss, you have 8 months. That is plenty of time to prepare." But Wade was already making lists in his head, plans and preparations. He would build the finest nursery Montana Territory had ever seen. He would make sure Josie had everything she needed, that she stayed healthy and safe. He would protect this new life growing inside her with everything he had. That night, lying in bed with Josie curled against his side, Wade let himself imagine the future. A child, maybe more than one eventually, teaching them to ride and work the ranch, watching Josie mother them with the same care she showed Hope. Growing old together, watching their children have children of their own. "What are you thinking about?" Josie asked sleepily. "Everything, our whole life stretched out ahead of us." "Does it look good?" "It looks perfect." She snuggled closer. "I am glad. I used to think my life was over, that I would never be more than the broken girl on the auction block. You saved me from that, Wade." "No," he said firmly. "You saved yourself. You just needed someone to give you the chance." Hope, who they had started letting sleep out of her cage at night now that she was used to the cabin, chirped from her perch on the windowsill. She did that sometimes in her sleep, small sounds like she was dreaming of songs. Winter came to the Montana Territory with a vengeance. Snow piled high around the cabin, drifts reaching nearly to the windows. The cattle moved to lower pastures where they could still graze. Miguel and Carlos earned their keep 3 times over, breaking trails through the snow to get feed to the animals, keeping the water troughs from freezing solid. Josie's pregnancy progressed. She showed earlier than expected, her belly rounding out under her dresses. Wade could not keep his hands off her, constantly touching that growing bump, talking to the baby inside. He read to her stomach in the evenings, stories from the few books they owned, nonsense and poetry and whatever he thought might be interesting. "The baby cannot hear you yet," Josie said, amused. "You do not know that, maybe it can." Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly with Miguel and Carlos. Wade had carved a rocking chair for Josie, spending every spare moment in secret to get it just right. She cried when she saw it, hormones making her more emotional than usual. They sat in it together, Wade's arms around her, rocking gently while Hope sang and the fire crackled. "This is the best Christmas I have ever had," Josie said. "Better than when you were a child, different. When I was young, Christmas was about excitement and presents and staying up late. This is about peace, about being exactly where I am supposed to be. I feel the same way." In January, Wade began building the addition to the cabin. He worked when weather permitted, framing out a new room that would serve as a nursery and eventually a children's room. Miguel and Carlos helped, and even Josie pitched in where she could, though Wade tried to keep her from doing anything too strenuous. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested when he told her to sit down for the third time in an hour. "I know. But humor me. I just want you safe." "We are safe. We are home." February brought a cold snap that froze everything solid. Then March arrived with false promises of spring, warming just enough to create mud everywhere before freezing again. April was better, the snow finally melting for good, grass beginning to green up. The cattle moved back to higher pastures. Wade started breaking a new batch of horses, young stock he had bought at a bargain price over the winter. And through it all, Josie grew. Her belly became huge, or so it seemed to Wade. She moved differently now, one hand always on her lower back, her walk more of a waddle. She tired easily but refused to stop working, still tending the chickens and cooking meals, though she let Wade take over the heavier chores. Hope seemed to sense that something important was happening. The Sparrow rarely left Josie's side, perching on her shoulder or the back of her chair, singing almost constantly. It was like she was preparing for something, practicing her song for a grand performance. On the 1st of June, under a warm sun and clear blue sky, Josie went into labor. Wade had thought he was prepared. He had helped with difficult births among the cattle and horses. He had read every book he could find on childbirth. He had Mrs. Grayson on standby, ready to ride out at a moment's notice. Nothing prepared him for the reality of watching Josie in pain. It started in the morning, small cramps that she dismissed as false labor. By noon, her water had broken and the contractions were coming regularly. By evening, she was in active labor, gripping Wade's hand hard enough to leave bruises, crying out with each wave of pain, "Mrs." Grayson arrived and took charge, her competent hands and calm demeanor a godsend. "You are doing fine, dear," she told Josie. "First babies take their time, just keep breathing through it." Wade felt helpless. All his strength, his ability to work and fight and provide, meant nothing in the face of this. All he could do was hold Josie's hand, wipe her forehead with a cool cloth and tell her he loved her. "I am scared," Josie gasped during a brief respite between contractions. "I know. But you are the strongest person I know. You can do this. Stay with me. I am not going anywhere." Hope sang through the whole ordeal, her voice rising and falling with Josie's cries. It should have been annoying, but somehow it was comforting instead. The bird's song became a thread connecting them all, a reminder that life continued, that beauty existed even in pain. As night fell and lamps were lit around the cabin, Mrs. Grayson announced it was time to push. "The baby is ready, dear. On the next contraction, you push as hard as you can." What followed was the most intense hour of Wade's life. Josie pushed and cried and swore in language that would have made Miguel blush. Wade held her up, let her squeeze his hands until he thought bones might break, and told her over and over that she could do this. And then, just when Wade thought Josie could not possibly have any strength left, Mrs. Grayson said, "The head is out. One more push, dear. Just one more." Josie gave one final, tremendous push, a sound torn from her throat that was half scream and half triumph. And then there was a new sound in the cabin, a small, indignant wail that announced a brand new life. "It is a boy," Mrs. Grayson said, laughing with joy as she held up the squirming infant. "You have a son." Wade could not speak. He could barely breathe. "Mrs." Grayson cleaned the baby quickly, her hands practiced and sure, then wrapped him in a blanket and placed him on Josie's chest. "Hello, little one," Josie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my baby boy." The baby stopped crying almost immediately. his unfocused eyes trying to find his mother's face. He was tiny and red and perfect, with a shock of dark hair that he clearly got from Wade. "You want to hold him?" Josie asked Wade, who had not moved from his position beside the bed. Wade reached out with shaking hands and took his son. The weight of him was nothing and everything, a small warm bundle that represented the entire future. "Hey there, little man," he said, his voice breaking. "I am your papa. I am going to take such good care of you." Hope, who had been quiet during the baby's arrival, suddenly burst into song. It was the most beautiful melody Wade had ever heard from her, complex and joyful, full of welcome and celebration. She sang and sang, perched on the bedpost, her small body vibrating with the effort. "She is singing for him," Josie said wonderingly. "Hope is singing for our son." "What should we name him?" Wade asked. They had discussed names, of course, but had not settled on anything definite. Now, holding his son while Hope sang, Wade knew exactly what the boy should be called. "Samuel," he said. "Samuel Thomas Irving." Josie smiled. "Samuel, it is perfect." Mrs. Grayson stayed through the night, making sure both mother and baby were doing well. By morning, when Miguel and Carlos tentatively knocked on the cabin door, everything had settled into a new normal. Josie was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant. Baby Samuel was asleep in the cradle Wade had built months ago, and Hope was perched on the edge of the cradle, standing guard over the newest member of her flock. The next months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant worry. Samuel was healthy and strong, but he was also colicky and seemed to only sleep for an hour at a time. Wade and Josie took turns walking the floor with him, bouncing and rocking and singing lullabies in voices hoarse from overuse. Through it all, Hope was a constant presence. She seemed to have appointed herself the baby's guardian. When Samuel cried, she sang to him. When he slept, she perched nearby and kept watch. More than once, Wade woke to find the Sparrow nestled in the cradle beside Samuel, her small body warm against his sleeping son. "She loves him," Josie said, watching the bird with soft eyes. "Almost as much as we do." "Almost," Wade agreed, "though I think we might love him more than is humanly possible." "Is there such a thing as loving your child too much?" "I hope not, because if there is, we are in trouble." As Samuel grew, he became easier. He started sleeping longer stretches. He smiled, real honest smiles that lit up his whole face. He laughed, a gurgling baby laugh that made everyone around him smile in return. He was fascinated by Hope, his eyes following her movements, his little hands reaching for her when she perched close enough. The ranch prospered. Wade hired another hand to help Miguel and Carlos, a young man named Jake who had good instincts with cattle. They increased the herd to nearly 200 head. Wade's horse training business grew, ranchers from all over the territory seeking out his skills. Money was not plentiful, but it was steady. They expanded the cabin again, adding a proper sitting room. Josie planted a bigger garden. They bought a second milk cow and a bull for breeding. Life was good. 2 years after Samuel was born, Josie told Wade she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with less shock and more quiet joy. They knew what to expect now, the hard parts and the beautiful parts. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1880, an easier birth than Samuel's had been. They named her Anna Rose, after both their mothers. She had Josie's auburn hair and Wade's blue eyes, a combination that made her startlingly beautiful even as an infant. Hope sang the day Anna was born, just as she had for Samuel. The Sparrow was older now, moving a bit slower, her feathers not quite as glossy. But her song was still sweet and true, a welcome to this new life. Samuel, now a rambunctious 2-year-old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He wanted to hold her constantly, touch her tiny hands, sing to her in his babbling toddler voice. Wade and Josie watched their children together and marveled at the life they had built. "You ever think about that day at the auction?" Josie asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, Samuel playing with wooden blocks at their feet, Anna asleep in Josie's arms. "About how different things could have been, sometimes," Wade admitted. "But then I think about how things are and I cannot imagine any other life. I was so scared that day. I thought my life was over. It was just beginning. Thanks to you. Thanks to us. You could have run when I gave you the chance, you could have left. But you stayed and you fought for this life and you made it beautiful." Josie leaned her head on his shoulder. "We made it beautiful. Together." Hope, who was perched on the porch railing nearby, sang a short trill of agreement. The Sparrow was slowing down, spending more time sleeping, less time exploring. But she still sang, her voice a constant soundtrack to their lives. The years passed, as years do. Samuel grew into a sturdy boy who loved horses and wanted to be a cowboy like his father. Anna became a laughing, cheerful child who followed her older brother everywhere. Wade's ranch continued to prosper. They added sheep to the operation, which Josie oversaw with the same competence she brought to everything. In 1883, Josie gave birth to another son, Henry Wade Irving. By then, Samuel was 5 and Anna was 3, old enough to be excited about a new baby. Henry was a calm baby, easygoing and content, the opposite of his colicky older brother. Hope was there for his birth too, though she was moving very slowly by then. The Sparrow was old for her kind, nearly 10 years since Josie had first found her. Her song was not as strong, but it was still there, still beautiful. One morning in the fall of 1884, Wade found Hope lying still in her cage. She had passed in the night, quietly and peacefully. He woke Josie gently, and together they told the children. Samuel cried openly. Anna did not fully understand, but she cried because her brother did. Even baby Henry seemed to sense something was wrong, fussing more than usual. They buried Hope in the garden, under the rose bush that Josie had planted their first spring together. Wade carved a small wooden marker while the children watched solemnly. "Hope," Josie read the inscription Wade had carved. "Faithful friend, beautiful singer, you taught us that broken things can still be whole." "I thought she would be with us forever," Samuel said, his voice thick with tears. "In a way, she will be," Josie told him, kneeling down to his level. "Every time you hear a sparrow sing, you can think of her. She is part of our family's story now forever." That night, lying in bed, Josie cried in Wade's arms. "I know it is silly to mourn a bird like this. It is not silly. She was with you through the worst time of your life. She was there when we met, when we married, when our children were born. She was family. She was, and I am going to miss her song. Me too. But Josie, look at what we have built. Look at our children, our ranch, our life." Hope's song is still here. It is just different now. It is in Samuel's laugh and Anna's chatter and Henry's baby coos. It is in the life we made together. Josie nodded against his chest. "You are right. I know you are right. It just hurts. Of course it hurts. Love always does when it ends. But the hurt means it mattered. She mattered." They held each other as they grieved, taking comfort in their shared loss and shared love. Life continued as it always does. The children grew. Samuel started helping Wade with the horses, showing a natural talent for training. Anna developed a love of reading, devouring every book Wade could get his hands on. Henry was still a baby, but he showed signs of being the adventurous one, constantly getting into things he should not. The ranch expanded further. They built a larger barn, added more outbuildings. Miguel's hair went completely white, and he started talking about retiring, maybe going back to Mexico to visit family. Carlos married a girl from Butte and brought her to live in a small house they built on the ranch property. Wade and Josie grew older too, though they hardly noticed the passing years. There were streaks of silver in Josie's auburn hair now. Wade's face was more lined, weathered by years of sun and wind, but they were happy, deeply and fundamentally happy. In 1888, Josie gave birth to their fourth and final child, a daughter they named Grace Hope Irving. The middle name was in honor of the Sparrow who had been there at the beginning of their story. Grace was a beautiful baby, healthy and strong, with a lusty cry that announced her presence to the world. 4 children, Wade said wonderingly, holding baby Grace while Josie rested after the birth. We have 4 children. We are blessed, Josie said simply. We are. More than I ever thought possible. The years rolled on. Samuel grew into a young man, taking on more responsibility around the ranch. He had his father's height and his mother's coloring, a striking combination that made girls in town take notice. Anna became a school teacher, riding into Ruby City 3 times a week to teach children their letters and numbers. Henry proved to be the hoarse whisperer of the family, even better than Wade at gentle, difficult animals. And Grace, the baby, was everyone's darling, spoiled by her older siblings and parents alike. In 1895, Samuel married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property. Wade and Josie stood beside their son as he took his vows, and Wade remembered his own hasty wedding in Ruby City nearly 20 years before. How different the circumstances, and yet how similar the emotions. The hope, the fear, the absolute certainty that this was the right person. We are getting old, Josie said at Samuel's wedding reception. We are getting distinguished, Wade corrected with a grin. Our son is married. That makes us old. It makes us parents of a married man. Big difference. She laughed and kissed him, right there in front of half the county. I love you, Wade Irving, just as much as I did that day you bought my papers. And I love you, Josie Irving, more than I did that day, which I did not think was possible. In 1897, Samuel and his wife gave Wade and Josie their first grandchild, a boy they named Wade Samuel. Holding his grandson, Wade felt the circle of life completing itself in ways he had never expected. This tiny baby was the future, the continuation of everything he and Josie had built. Your grandmother was right, Wade told baby Wade Samuel. Broken things can still be whole. And they can create something beautiful. The turn of the century came. The year 1900 arrived with celebration and reflection. Wade and Josie were in their 40s now, still healthy and strong but definitely showing their age. The ranch was firmly established, profitable, a legacy they would pass down to their children. On a warm day in June of 1900, Wade and Josie took a rare day off from work. They packed a picnic and rode out to the meadow where Wade had proposed properly to Josie years after their hasty wedding. The place where he had told her he wanted to spend his life with her, not because of legal papers but because he loved her. They spread a blanket and sat together, watching clouds drift across an impossibly blue sky. In the distance, they could see their ranch, the buildings and fences and grazing cattle that represented so much work and love. You ever have regrets? Wade asked. Josie thought about it seriously before answering. Sometimes I regret the pain that brought us together. I wish my parents had lived, that my father had not spiraled into debt and drink. I wish I had not ended up on that auction block. She paused, reaching for Wade's hand. But I cannot regret where we ended up. This life, our children, our love. It is everything I never knew I could have. I was so lonely before you, Wade said. I did not even realize how lonely. I thought I was content with the ranch and the work, but it was just existing, not living. You taught me how to live, Josie. We taught each other. A sparrow landed on the blanket beside them, hopping closer with the bold curiosity common to its kind. It tilted its head, looking at them with bright eyes, then opened its beak and sang. Josie and Wade looked at each other and smiled. "You think?" Josie started. "No," Wade said gently. "Hope is gone, but her spirit lives on. In every sparrow's song, in our children and grandchildren, in the life we built. She would be happy to see us now, I think." "I think so too." They sat there for hours, talking and laughing and simply being together. By the time they rode back to the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Their children were waiting for them, all four of them having shown up for a surprise gathering. Samuel with his wife and son, Anna with a young man she had been courting, Henry with a wild horse he had just finished breaking, and Grace, still just 15, full of energy and life. "What is all this?" Josie asked, dismounting from Dove, who was old now but still gentle. "We wanted to celebrate," Anna said. 23 years since you and Papa got married." "That is not a typical anniversary to celebrate," Wade pointed out. "Who cares about typical?" Samuel said. "You two have the best love story I have ever heard. The lonely cowboy who bought the girl they called Broken. It is romantic and wonderful, and we wanted to honor it." "And remind you both how much we love you," Henry added. Grace ran forward and hugged both her parents at once. "You gave us everything. A home, a family, love. Thank you." Wade felt tears prick his eyes. He was not a man who cried easily, but this, surrounded by his children and the woman he loved more than life itself, this was worth tears. They had a feast that night, everyone contributing something. The long table was laden with food, and the cabin rang with laughter and conversation. Stories were told, some remembered differently by different people, all of them adding to the tapestry of their family's history. As the night wound down, and the children finally headed to their own homes, Wade and Josie found themselves alone on the porch once more. The stars were out in force, the Milky Way a river of light across the black sky. "We did good, didn't we?" Wade said. "We did better than good. We did amazing. I bought you for $50. Best investment you ever made." Wade laughed and pulled her close. "The very best." Years continued to pass, each one bringing changes but also continuity. Samuel had 2 more children. Anna married her young man and moved to his family's ranch, but they visited often. Henry found a wife at a horse sale of all places, a girl who loved animals as much as he did. Grace grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's kindness and her father's determination. Wade and Josie grew older gracefully, working less on the ranch but still contributing in ways that mattered. Wade still trained horses, though he left the more difficult ones to Henry now. Josie still tended her garden, now with Grace's help, and cooked meals for family gatherings that grew larger every year. On a crisp fall day in 1907, Wade and Josie celebrated their 30th anniversary. The party was massive, with children and grandchildren and friends from all over the territory. Ruby City had grown over the years, no longer a rough frontier town but a proper community. Many of the people who had witnessed their hasty wedding in 1877 were still alive, still around to remember. Father Benedict, now well into his 70s, gave a toast. "I have performed hundreds of weddings in my years as a chaplain," he said, his voice still booming despite his age. "But I have never forgotten the wedding of Wade and Josie Irving. It was born of necessity, but it became something beautiful, a testament to what love can do when given the chance to grow. To Wade and Josie, may you have many more years together." They danced that night, Wade and Josie, moving slowly to music played on a fiddle by one of their neighbors. Wade's back ached and Josie's feet hurt, but they did not care. They were together, surrounded by the life they had built, and that was all that mattered. "Thank you," Josie said as they danced. "For what?" "For seeing past the broken girl on the auction block, for seeing me, Thank you for letting me. For taking a chance on a lonely cowboy who did not know what he was missing until you showed him. We were lucky. We were blessed." The music continued, and so did they. Two people who had found each other against the odds and built something that would last long after they were gone. In 1910, Wade fell ill. It started as a cough, turned into pneumonia. He was 62 years old, still strong but not invincible. For weeks, he lay in bed while Josie nursed him with the same dedication she had once shown to a broken sparrow. "You are not allowed to die," she told him fiercely. "We have too much life left to live." "I am doing my best," Wade said, his voice weak but determined. He pulled through, though it took months for him to fully recover. When he was finally back on his feet, Wade had a new appreciation for every day. He had come close to leaving this life, close to leaving Josie, and it had scared him in ways he had not expected. "I thought I had more time," he said one evening. "You do have more time," Josie said. "We both do. We are not done yet." She was right. They had years left, though they were slower years, quieter years. They spent more time sitting on the porch, watching grandchildren play. They took walks around the ranch, pointing out places that held memories. Here was where Samuel had fallen and broken his arm. There was where Anna had learned to ride. This was the tree Henry had climbed and gotten stuck in. That was the spot where Grace had buried a beloved cat. Every corner of the ranch held stories, memories layered one on top of another like sediment forming rock. It was a history written not in words but in lived experience, in love and work and family. By 1915, Wade and Josie had 9 grandchildren and were expecting their 10th. The ranch was being run primarily by Samuel and Henry now, with Wade serving as an advisor. It was hard to step back, to let go of control, but Wade knew it was necessary. The next generation was ready. On a warm summer evening, very like the one when Hope had died, Josie and Wade sat on their porch. Their children had just left after Sunday dinner, a tradition they had maintained for years. The house was quiet, the sun was setting, and a sparrow was singing in the garden. "You hear that?" Josie asked. "I hear it. It sounds like Hope." "All sparrows sound a bit like Hope." "No, this one really sounds like her, that same pattern in the song." Wade listened more carefully. Josie was right. There was something familiar in the melody, a cadence that reminded him powerfully of the bird who had been there at the beginning of their story. "Maybe it is one of her descendants," Wade said. "Sparrows can live 3 or 4 years in the wild. If she had babies before we got her, and they had babies, and those babies had babies, we could be hearing her great-great-great-grandbird." Josie laughed. "Grandbird, is that a technical term?" "It is now." They sat and listened to the sparrow sing until the light faded and the bird flew away. In the darkness, illuminated only by lamplight from inside the cabin, Wade took Josie's hand. "I love you," he said. "I do not say it enough, but I love you more than I have words for. You show me every day. That is better than words. Do you ever think about that girl on the auction block? The one they called broken, sometimes. She feels like a different person, someone I used to be but am not anymore. You changed me, Wade. You loved me until I could love myself again. You did the same for me. I did not even know I needed saving until you showed up in my life." They sat there for a while longer, comfortable in the silence of long companionship. Then they went inside, to the bed they had shared for nearly 40 years, and held each other through another night. Years passed. Grandchildren grew and had children of their own. The ranch continued to prosper under Samuel and Henry's management, with input from Anna and Grace as well. The Irving name became synonymous with good horses and honest dealing throughout Montana. Wade and Josie grew very old, but they grew old together. Wade's hair went completely white. Josie's arthritis made her hands stiff in the mornings. But they still took walks around the ranch property, still sat on the porch in the evenings, still loved each other with the same depth they had found all those years ago. In the spring of 1925, Wade Irving passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 77 years old. He simply went to bed one night, kissed Josie goodnight like he had done thousands of times before, and did not wake up in the morning. The funeral was massive. People came from all over Montana to pay their respects to a man who had lived a good, honest life. But no one grieved more than Josie, who had lost her partner, her love, her best friend. "How do I go on without him?" she asked Anna through her tears. "The same way he would have gone on without you, by living the life he would want you to live, by loving the family you built together, by remembering that what you had was special and rare and beautiful." Josie tried. She really did. She stayed on the ranch, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told stories about Wade, keeping his memory alive. She tended her garden and fed the chickens and sat on the porch watching the sunset, but it was not the same without him. The cabin felt empty despite the constant flow of family members. The porch felt lonely even when she was surrounded by loved ones. At night, the bed was too big and too cold. She lasted 6 months. On a crisp October morning, just as the aspen trees were turning gold, Josie Irving passed away. She was 71 years old. The doctor said it was heart failure, but her children knew better. She had died of a broken heart, unable to live in a world without Wade. They buried her next to Wade on a hillside overlooking the ranch. The view encompassed everything they had built together, the cabin and barn and pastures and mountains rising beyond. At the funeral, every grandchild and great-grandchild had a story to share about Grandma and Grandpa, about their love and their kindness. Samuel, now in his 50s and looking remarkably like his father had, gave the final eulogy. "My parents had a love that people write stories about," he said. "They came together in the worst circumstances, a lonely cowboy and a girl the world called broken. But they built something beautiful. They showed all of us what real love looks like. Not the easy kind, but the kind that endures through hardship and loss and the simple wearing down of years. They loved each other until the very end, and even now I believe they are together. Death could not separate them for long." As if in agreement, a sparrow began to sing. It sat on a branch of the lone tree near the grave site, its small voice carrying clear across the assembled crowd. It sang a complex, beautiful melody that seemed to encompass joy and sorrow, hello and goodbye, memory and hope. Grace, who was now 40 and a mother of 5, smiled through her tears. "It is hope," she said. "Somehow it is hope, singing for them one more time." Whether it was truly descended from hope or just a sparrow singing because that is what sparrows do, no one could say. But everyone there felt it, the rightness of that moment, the sense that something was being completed. The sparrow sang through the entire service. When the last prayer was said and people began to drift away, it sang. When the last grandchild had laid a flower on the grave, it sang. It sang until the sun started to set, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and pink. Then, as the last light faded, the sparrow took flight. Despite what should have been impossible, despite all logic, it flew strongly and surely toward the setting sun, no sign of a crooked wing to hold it back. It flew and flew until it was just a speck against the brilliance, and then it was gone. "Did you see that?" Grace whispered to Anna. "I saw it," Anna confirmed, "or I saw something. Do you think?" "I think Mama and Papa are together, and somehow so is Hope. I think all the broken things have been made whole again." The Irving family continued to thrive. The ranch passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapters to the story. Samuel's grandchildren eventually sold off some of the land, but kept the original homestead, the cabin where Wade and Josie had built their life together. It became a family tradition to gather there every year on June 1st, the anniversary of Wade and Josie's wedding. They would tell stories, share meals, and always, there would be sparrows singing in the garden. The wooden marker Wade had carved for Hope's grave remained in the garden, weathered but readable. Someone, no one was ever quite sure who, maintained it over the years, keeping it standing, replacing it when necessary with an exact replica. The rosebush above Hope's grave grew massive, blooming every spring with deep red flowers that smelled like heaven. And every year, without fail, a pair of sparrows would nest in that rosebush. They would raise their young there, their songs filling the air from spring through summer. The Irving family came to see it as a blessing, a reminder of where they came from and the love that started everything. In 1977, 100 years after that fateful day at the auction in Ruby City, the Irving family held a massive reunion. Over 200 people descended on the old homestead, all of them descendants of Wade and Josie in one way or another. The cabin had been added onto over the years, but the original structure remained, lovingly maintained. Samuel's great-granddaughter, a woman in her 30s named Josie after her famous ancestor, gave a speech to the assembled family. 100 years ago today, she said, a lonely cowboy made a choice. He saw a woman who needed help and he helped her. He could not have known that this one act of kindness would lead to all of this. She gestured at the crowd around her. 200 people, all here because Wade Irving saw past the label the world had given Josie Elliott, because he saw her potential, her strength, her worth. They faced hardships, prejudice and legal battles, poverty at times, the simple struggle of building a life in a harsh land. But they had each other and they had love, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. We gather here today to honor them and to honor the legacy they left us. Not just this land, though that is part of it. Not just the Irving name, though we carry that proudly. But the lesson they taught us about love. Real love. The kind that sees past surface damage to the person underneath. The kind that commits even when it is hard. The kind that lasts. She paused, and in the silence, a sparrow began to sing. The crowd smiled, recognizing the now familiar soundtrack to their family gatherings. Hope sang the day Josie said I do, young Josie continued. A small brown sparrow with a crooked wing, celebrating the joining of two people who would become the foundation of all of us. That sparrow's song echoes down through generations. It reminds us that broken things can be beautiful, that love can heal. That family is not just blood, but choice and commitment and showing up every day. So today, we celebrate. We celebrate Wade and Josie. We celebrate hope. We celebrate every Irving who has carried their legacy forward, and we promise to continue doing so for generations to come. The celebration lasted long into the night. There was food and music and dancing. Stories were told and retold, embellished with time but essentially true. Children played in the same meadows where their ancestors had played. Young couples held hands and made promises, inspired by the love story that had started it all. And through it all, the sparrows sang. They sang from the rosebush and the fence posts and the roof of the old cabin. They sang like they knew this was important, like they were part of something bigger than themselves, because they were. They were the living reminder of where the Irving family had come from, of a girl called Broken who became whole, of a lonely cowboy who found his heart, of a small bird who taught them all that damaged things can still sing. As the sun set on that centennial celebration, the last descendant to leave the homestead was young Josie. She stood at Wade and Josie's grave, which had been freshly decorated with flowers for the occasion. She placed her hand on the weathered stone, feeling the connection to these people she had never met but whose love had made her existence possible. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being brave, for choosing love, for showing us the way." A sparrow landed on the gravestone beside her hand. It looked at her with bright eyes, tilted its head, and sang. Just a short melody, a few notes that hung in the evening air like a blessing, then it flew away, and young Josie did too, back to her own life and her own love story, carrying the legacy forward. The years continued to pass. The Irving family continued to grow and branch and spread. The ranch remained, a touchstone and a reminder. And the sparrows continued to sing, generation after generation, their voices a living link to a cowboy and a girl and a bird who had shown everyone what love could do. Because in the end, that was the real story. Not about being broken or lonely or desperate, but about being brave enough to love despite all those things, about seeing worth where others saw only damage, about singing even when your wing would not let you fly straight. It was about hope, and the way those two things intertwined to create something beautiful and lasting. It was about the day a sparrow sang at a wedding, celebrating two people who chose each other against the odds. And it was about how that song never really ended, but echoed down through years and generations, a reminder that love endures, that broken things can be made whole, that even the smallest voice can create the most beautiful music. That happy ever after is not a destination but a journey walked hand in hand, one day at a time, until the very end and then beyond. The end.